What is going on, Busy Bariatrics? Welcome to another episode of the Busy Bariatric Podcast. Today, I am really lucky to get someone who I heard on a podcast about 3 years ago, and it was probably one of the most profound listens I had had when it came to marriages, relationships, and everything else. I'm really excited that I finally got to meet this person in life a few months ago. And our guest today is Derek Coleman. Derek is a therapist who focuses on marriage counseling as well as a variety of other expertises. I brought Derek on because a few years back he was on this episode of Barry Nation where he broke down relationships as well as how to communicate effectively with your spouse and partner over weight loss surgery. Derek is a wealth of knowledge, and I really just brought him on so I could get a chance to pick his brain and see how everything's going. So, how are you, Derek?
Man, I'm good, bro. I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well. As we're recording this, we're right done Thanksgiving and we're getting ready to go into the holiday season. This may be recording or dropping a little later, but it's definitely that time of year where I think there's like a lot of high stress when it comes to both bariatrics, relationships, marriages, and not necessarily like in a finger pointing sort of way, but just because our calendar crunches, it can sometimes feel a little bit stressful. Do you notice that when you're working with clients?
Well, for sure. I mean, I got people that stress out because family that they don't, really get along with is going to be where they're going, or decisions even going to be with family that maybe they haven't talked to or have disagreements with. And then especially this year, given the election, the all the uproar around the election and how people's feelings were everywhere about who, depending on who got elected on both sides, right? So I think this year has been especially stressful for a lot of people. Just working through it. I think I would compare to the last few years. I think this year's probably been most stressful out of all the.
I didn't even think of it from that perspective, but as a history teacher, I feel like I have been tightrope walking when it comes to the election. And I don't want to get into results or anything, but I think just for adults in the last like 12 years or so, it has become a little bit more stressful of how do you share your opinion? What do you discuss? And even at family functions, I've seen articles of like family members will almost cancel other family members based upon political beliefs. Do you notice that from like a relationship standpoint?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what, like, I would probably say maybe 4 to 6 weeks leading up to the election, and then now post-election. That's all we were talking about. The couples, and a few of them really heavily. But a wife might think this way, a husband might think this way. One listens to this, the other one listens to that, and it's just driving a wedge in between them because they're not doing the work, they're not doing the research and learning and growing together in it. They're getting information elsewhere and then turning at each other and be like, "Well, you're wrong for this. No, you're wrong for this," and it's like. So yes, needless to say, I've had numerous conversations. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's really sad because, political affiliations aside, like the wedge that's driving just in intimate relationships is so sad. And then, yeah, family, right? Like that's another conversation. Well, how do I go around this family when they think this way or they think that way? How do I talk to them? I can't believe they really think this. And it's like, at the end of the day, man, and I'm not an advocate for like you have to have your family around if they mistreat you and do all the stuff, right? Like there's definitely boundaries, and if family's not treating you right, just set boundaries and don't go. And I'm also not a proponent of let political affiliations drive a wedge between family either. Like to me, there has to be, I think, yes, political beliefs here, but we're family at the end of the day, and no matter what happens politically, we need each other.
And I love how you framed all of that because I'm going to bring it right back to bariatric surgery on this. I think a lot of the times when it comes to relationship dynamics and what I've noticed from being in support groups, from being around friends and family and everything, I've noticed the recurring themes with couples that seem to struggle where it's not really the bariatric surgery that's the issue. It's almost like a lack of communication about the decision making or process that's in there. How do you kind of coach or, counsel clients of communicating major life choices like bariatric surgery or political affiliation or new job? Like there's a lot of things where I think you have it right on the head of it's a lack of communication. So how do you get better at that?
Well, first off, it's hard if you haven't if you haven't been practicing it right and actually living it and experiencing it. But the biggest thing is like we can both have our feelings and our thoughts and our perspectives, and it doesn't need to change. It doesn't need to, like, we don't, I don't have, you may think differently than I do. I don't have to change how I feel because you feel differently. Like, it can exist at the same time. I can be thinking through this decision. You can be worried about me, and worried. I'm thinking about bariatric surgery, right? And how big of a surgery that is. And people, I was talking about this in the panel at the retreat, and it was like, a lot of people become very judgmental of it. It seems like from outsiders, right? From my understanding of everything, obviously, I'm not a patient. I'm a support and advocate, but and I'd be curious if most of that's not fear of safety, fear of doing something drastic to yourself and them not being educated, and fear that you go under. I mean, anytime anybody goes under anesthesia, right, we're always worried that they come out on the other side, right? So a lot of the judgments and different comments and different things, I think, are driven out of fear and a lack of education. And so that's, somebody can't get educated if there's no communication. And if you had a 4-year-old asking you questions, right, you're not going to judge them for not knowing. But most of the time, we don't understand. Adults don't know either. But we have this judgment mentality when somebody's asking questions, or they're ignorant on something, or whatever. We have this judgment mentality to judge that person. And sometimes, obviously, there may need to be some judgment on some things people say. But when I'm thinking specifically bariatrics, there's so much misinformation. Like,
Yeah.
even myself, like, had it not been for Jason and Sarah, like, I was uneducated prior to them getting surgery, right? And they have enlightened me so much and helped educate me so much, and in my own research and everything. So I'm coming from both perspectives of, at one point, being uneducated and having my thoughts and judgments about what it was and different things, to going through the process as much as possible with Jason and Sarah and getting educated. And so that's where I'm kind of speaking from, of like, there is a fear aspect, and then there's just a lack of education aspect, and we can't educate people if we just get upset with them and cut them off.
Yeah, I think it's such an important part. Like, something that I coach my clients with is, I truly believe most people ask questions because there's just a lack of knowledge. And I almost teach exactly to your terms of, treat them like a 4-year-old. A lot of the times, I think with bariatric patients, you'll get questions like, you can eat that, or you're going to eat all that. And I really do think it comes from just, there isn't enough knowledge and enough mainstream idea of what bariatric surgery is or does. And I kind of teach them to, like, be an ambassador. So it's almost like, explain why you're doing it, what caused you to do it, and everything else. So it's something as simple as like, you're going to eat all that. I'll say, yes, at 4 years post op, I can pretty much eat the same amount of food that an adult can. If you look at my plate, I prioritized protein over here, vegetables over here, and some fun foods right here so that I have a level of balance to it. And I'll actually ask, does that help make sense of how I'm doing it? And a lot of the times, maybe I'm just lucky of who I surround myself, or I've cut out the right people early, is they'll be like, yeah, I totally get that now. And I don't know if that's the teacher in me, but how do you get people to kind of start that sort of like ambassadorship or education of people around others so that it is a safe space to open that discussion?
I think that comes with, again, I'm just obviously not being a patient, I'm speaking from a non-patient perspective. But from a therapist perspective, I think this comes with time and emotional intelligence, right? Like, and I'm thinking, prior to surgery, how many times did that, you going to eat all that, actually was a judgmental statement, right? And
Hmm.
so post surgery, you're still filtering that statement through pre-surgery filters. Whereas post surgery, now it may be a question of, I didn't know you could eat all that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to eat all that? Like, and so for me, I'm sitting here thinking, like, there's some worry there. Like, you're post surgery and you're trying to manage, your lifestyle and everything. So you're going to, like, I'm worried about you. I'm seeing how much you're eating now compared to what you were eating. Are you going to eat all that? There's, like, a lack of education, confusion, curiosity in that, right? So, learning, doing your own work, I think, therapeutically, obviously, is a big deal, so that you can start to filter those questions through a different lens, a lens of lack of education, a lens of curiosity and confusion, more so than that lens of judgment that you probably got heavily prior to surgery and prior to weight loss.
I think that's a really good point. Is, in my own personal experience, I think I judged my plate and my actions harsher than the people around me, but I projected it if that makes sense,
Absolutely.
of people being like, oh, you're getting seconds. And it's like, lay off me, I'm starving. I think I bring a lot more to the table of my own emotions around food than anyone else did, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. There's so much we project on other people based on what we're actually feeling internally, and whether we recognize it or not.
So if we're projecting and we notice that we're projecting a lot of our emotions on people, and in the bariatric process, I always think it comes down to a lot of the times I'll hear people say, like, they didn't have a bariatric option for me at dinner.
Mm,
How do we start that conversation, but also realize that, like, not everyone knows what they're supposed to provide for you for dinner? Does that make sense?
absolutely. Absolutely. I'd actually want to turn that question on you, see what you found in that, how to approach that situation.
So it's a little bit tough for me. I really struggle with just giving a text or a call in a head. Like, I kind of handled the 3 months leading up to bariatric surgery with, I'm going to let my inner circle know and then everyone else kind of not know. So they kind of understood, like, if I'm coming to a place, I did a lot of homework. Like, I'd go to support groups and be like, I'm going to my first social function after weight loss surgery. How should I talk to people? And a lot of the advice was like, bring a tray of food that you can actually eat. Like, like, explain your choices. But I'm always curious, like, how do you open that conversation if you're hesitant with friends that, like, aren't your close best friends?
Sure. I mean, my initial reaction to that would be, if you're that hesitant, what else might be going on relationally, right? Like, if I can't send you a text and say, "Hey, would you mind having some of these different options available for me?" Or, "Hey, can I bring my own platter of this, food that I can eat?" If there's a hesitancy there with this person, what else may be going on relationally that's causing that barrier, causing that hesitation, right? And so, um, you know, that's where I think the emotional intelligence comes back in, doing your own work, doing your own kind of emotional strengthening of being able to. I know why I'm anxious about this. I'm nervous about what they're going to say or what they're going to think. I'm nervous about it myself, and I still need to do this for myself. And learning to push through that anxiety, push through that worry, and build that experience that, and get on the other side of that to realize there's not that big of a thing to worry about. And if that person reacts poorly or says something judgmentally, then you got another conversation there as far as, do they deserve your presence or not?
Yeah, I feel like going all the way back to with my wife, I was so afraid to tell her of bariatric surgery, and she was so supportive with everything. I also was the moron that I signed up for the information at the hospital she works at. And she's like, in my job, I get pinged whenever my name shows up for everything. So it was like, that's how she actually found out I was having or considering weight loss surgery.
Yeah,
And she's like, also, it's on my insurance, so the mail comes to me.
right.
Again, I'm really smart on some things. I am a moron when it comes to other things.
But again, there was probably a lot there that you were projecting, keeping you for feelings you had on your own that you were projecting and putting maybe on her and telling her what she might think. And that's where I'm saying, like, learning, like, hey, I wonder if this is more about me and what I'm dealing with than it is actually about this person. Let me give them a chance. I tell people this as far as intimate relationships and other relationships too. Like, give them a chance to mess up. Give them a chance to be judgmental. Give them the chance to ridicule you. You're operating off of a thought of what they might do. They haven't done it yet, though. And if they have, then again, there's another conversation to have. But if they haven't, you don't make a decision based off something they haven't actually done. You're punishing them for something they never did. Give them the opportunity to do it.
And I love that because I think if I look at my own personal experience, and Derek, let me know if you're similar with that, I've probably learned more from failure than success. And even just having safe places to fail, because I don't think this would have led to divorce if I brought up the subject of bariatric surgery, nor has, like, the D word been sprinkled. But at the same time, I naturally went to, she's going to want to leave me. She's going to think that I'm trying to change to get away from her. And it took my therapist to kind of be like, well, why do you think that? I'm like, oh, it's all in my head. And he's like, well, why do you think it's there? It's like, well, I have my own issues of intimacy and who stays with me and who chooses to stay in the house.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Like again, yeah, so as far as the fail, I laughed at the failure did because I've my wife calls them my life scout badges because I have ADHD, and so like that interests me, that interests me, that interests me, and I failed. Excuse me, I failed so many times throughout the course of our marriage, so I definitely understand the failure part. But yeah, again, I try to help people in their processing start looking at things and before they make a judgment on somebody else or make an accusation of somebody else, sit back for a moment and say, is this actually about me? Or is this about this other person? Is this about what I'm feeling and my thoughts about myself? Or is this actually what this person is doing or has done before I make a decision on whether I'm going to give them a chance to mess up or not?
I love that because I think one of my bigger issues is I really was like, my wife's going to judge me for my food choices. And my wife's like, I didn't judge you for food choices when you got to 365 pounds. I don't judge you, period, on a lot of this.
Right,
And I think it's a lot of just understanding where they come from.
right.
So if you have like a patient who has finally gotten up the courage to have the conversation with their loved one about bariatric surgery or a difficult subject, what advice do you give them as far as like they just always say, I don't have the right time for it to come up? Does that make sense?
I hear that all. It's never the right time. I just haven't had the time. I mean, I say that myself as a therapist with my own stuff I need to bring up with people in my life, right? Like I just haven't had the right time. There's never. I mean, it might be seem cliche, but it's never going to be a right time. Like it just doesn't work that way. Hard, uncomfortable conversations. There's never going to be a time where it's like now's the time. It's just because of again of how we're feeling about it. It's uncomfortable. We most people struggle bringing up those uncomfortable conversations, and so there's never going to be a time where it just clicks. You just have to find the time, or like it, if you have to be really what's the word I'm looking for? Like hard on yourself in the sense of like I need to make a calendar date to do this. Hey babe, like this Friday night I got something I want to talk to you about. I want to make sure I do it. So let's talk about it. Or you can do something to where and then just force yourself through that anxiety as much as possible to experience the other side of it. A lot of times that fear, the only way we can overcome that fear is either through therapy, processing it, and a part of that is actually experiencing it and realizing, oh, I don't have that much to be afraid of at this particular subject. So I can bring stuff up with my wife and talk it through with her and realize I don't really need to be scared of talking to this person. That's how you build trust. So one of the things with trust is that they found in the research is the strongest connection and the most trust is built in hard, difficult, uncomfortable conversations. That is when the most trust and connection is built. And so if you're not having these moments, how are you building the deepest, strongest connection? You're not. And so give yourself an opportunity to do that.
I will say, I 1,000% agree on that. I will say we do not have a perfect marriage. But it's almost like we have been through so many issues that we've worked through that I don't think either one of us will get divorced, if only because it's like, no, we've gotten through so much at this point. Like we've invested too much. Like we're
Right.
almost in it. And we do like each other. I will say after 13 years, we still like each other. But when we start to fight, we almost have it on the scale of like, well, is this harder or worse than that? We're like, no, it's not even close. Like, why are we
Right. Right. Yeah. My wife and I have been married, we'll be 25 years in next June coming up. And so it's like we're at a point where one, we don't fight often because we just get along. We love each other. We're friends.
we've already settled it at some point, is what I say.
Right. And then when we do fight, it's like, what are we even fighting for at this point? Like, is this even worth fighting about? Like, no, it's not. Hey, I'm sorry, kiss, go, And then there's other things too, like, and I don't want to get too far off what you're asking, but there's other things
No,
too.
this is kind of how I like to go. Is like, so we'll
Well,
go wherever.
part of that with relationships too is having rituals of connection built in, right? So when I get up in the morning, or before I go to work, I always give my wife a kiss goodbye in the morning. Like that is, and by the way, the research shows that men who kiss their wives goodbye in the morning actually live 5 years longer. So it's
I'm definitely dying 5 years earlier. So
well, you better start kissing your wife, man, in the morning before you go to work.
I am up at like I will say this, my wife has a really fun schedule, but it's one of those of like, when I leave in the morning at like 5 o'clock to get to the gym, she's clearly out cold. And there are some days I used to say it was mean, but it's like, when I leave, she's in her pajamas. When I come home, she's in her pajamas, and she makes significantly more than me. So it's like, where did I go wrong in my scale?
I'm still giving her a kiss goodbye while she's sleeping.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because I'm giving her a kiss now. If I was waking her up screaming at the kids or something like that, obviously she may cuss me out a little bit. But I'm giving her a kiss goodbye. Like that's just what it is. Like,
My
saying
wife
I'm
My
doing
wife is an easy startler. Like when she's asleep, I can't wait to do this tomorrow and be like, Derek told me I had to do this.
blame it on me. Blame it on me. And tell her that it's a health benefit. I gotta kiss you, babe. It's gonna help me live 5 years longer.
I promise you, if she finds out that I will live 5 years longer and she only lives 5 minutes longer, she's going to be like, get away from me right now.
Well, so I think that I'd rather live five. So she's gonna be mad at me because I want to live 5 years longer. So I'm gonna kiss you every morning.
Nothing better than starting your morning with a spite kiss. Like that absolutely is like, I'm trying to outlive you.
Right, right,
Oh,
exactly.
no.
Other things like saying "I love you" goodbye on every telephone call, right? Like that is. And if my wife says bye without saying "I love you," I don't say anything until she says it. Like I'm like, huh? Right? Like if she says bye first without saying "I love you," I'm like, excuse me, right? Like so, there's these rituals of connection that get built into our relationship that help in those moments. We're building connection, we're building trust, so that in those moments when we have conflict and disagreements, we have all of that to back on, to rely on, or fall back on. Of like, do I really want to be upset about this? Like, look at all this stuff that I have with this person that we've built. It outweighs anything that's happening in the moment. So let's work through it.
No, and I think all of that is perfect. And rituals of connection, I think, just are the keys to any healthy marriage, not just bariatric or any other level of it. One of the things that I always think is like when people say, like, well, my spouse changed after weight loss surgery, or I changed after weight loss surgery. How do you make sure that you're maintaining those rituals of connection while still building either healthier habits or changing what you do for your love language? Like, how can people get started on that?
Yeah, I would say so. Two things. One, love languages. I struggle with the love languages. Not that they're bad or anything like that, but a lot of people seem to get attached to them and they won't let go.
On a side note, I personally do not believe that anyone should identify as anything because I think it pigeonholes. So we are
Right.
on the same page of
Good,
that.
good. Yeah, I mean, and this is where again communication needs to be a huge part of what post surgery. I mean, pre surgery and post surgery, what we do in our intimate relationships. Like we need to be talking about this because even with there was a young lady that I talked with briefly at the retreat after the panel, and she said my husband said I miss the woman I was married to.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
Man, I mean, it's right. So what I hear in that as a therapist, obviously, like as a patient, it's like, well, I don't want to be that person anymore, right? And I get that. As a therapist, I hear grief in there, sadness in there, right? Like there's so much more in there that can be talked about and set with, and we can sit with people in their grief and sadness and validate them without having to again have to change anything about ourselves. So as a patient, I'm going to continue on this journey, but I also, and at the same time, make space for my spouse to have their emotions and the things that they're going through as well as a spouse of a patient. And that doesn't have to derail me or make me change what I'm doing or change how I feel about this. But they need, as an intimate partner, my partner needs space too. And there probably is a lot of difference. I mean, again, from what I understand, you do go through a lot of changes. Your brain's not as cloudy anymore because it's not being fed with the food it was being fed with, and so you're thinking clearer. Your emotions are probably a lot more over the place because you're not having food to help with those emotions, and so you're going like there's just so much changes. Imagine what your intimate partner who's been with you up for years at some point for some people is going through as well, and so it's creating space for both. And that's what it seems like we don't do it, and not just with bariatric patients, other things, we get on this kick of whatever it may be, or on this new journey or whatever in our life. And it's like, well, this is about me, nobody else matters. And it's like, no, your intimate relationship at the least, that relationship and all other relationships can kick rocks for me. But at the least, my intimate relationship is the most important thing. and that deserves space. And so, yes, I'm changing as a person, and my spouse has to learn this new me, this new version of me, and they need space to be able to deal with their feelings about that.
No, and I think it's so important. And you bring up another point of this almost like, I don't want to say selfishness, but almost like I had a scorched earth era after weight loss surgery where it's like, it is me first, I'm driving my results. And it took like both my wife and like a couple good friends be like, you're kind of being a dick. And I don't think that gets covered enough of like, how do you find a balance between reprioritizing yourself and completely, lack of better words, being a dick?
Again, I would be interested in what was going on internally with you to be that was fueling the dickness, right?
I will say, if it helps, I was so afraid of failure. Like, from when I worked with my therapist, I was so afraid that, like, if bariatric surgery failed, this was it. Like, I realized I'm going to be trapped for life as a morbidly obese person.
And that's a scary freaking thought.
Yes.
Yeah,
I took like every bad a movie where the guy gets out of prison and gives like that, like, I ain't ever going back. And it's like, yeah, that was me for probably 3 years after weight loss surgery. Of like, I will be almost ruthless in relationships to make sure that I'm in the right spot.
right. And that, I think it goes back again to the work that you're doing individually. And really, I would be curious. I don't know the stats on this or if there are any stats. What's the work we're doing as a couple?
Yeah.
Are we prioritizing? And this is a society thing that I think that I have a real issue with our society is we're so individual focused. Like we're me focused. Like, and it just is it's sad because people rob them being so me focused, they rob themselves of really deep, intimate connection with other people. And we are relational beings. Like we're not meant to be live in solitary, solitude and be only focused on us. We're meant to be focused on relationships and our family and our community. And so, but our society now has driven in us this idea of me, and especially when you're on a new journey, health journey, something like that, a growth journey, self growth journey, it's driving. You got to focus on you. You got to focus. You don't let anybody else tell you anything, and it's just I think that's counterproductive and really causes a lot of damage. Whereas like how much work are we doing together? Because again, this is us going through this journey. Yes, you're experiencing this individually because you got the surgery and you're doing the different things, but this is a us journey. Like we're in this together. And so how much work are we doing together? And how much are we actually acknowledging that fear that you had? Like, how often are we sitting there and saying, I am freaking afraid that if this fails, I'm going to be this person I was for the rest of my life. And that terrifies me. How much are we sitting in that together and actually talking about that to where now, when you're being more of a jerk about things, your wife has an understanding and empathy for that to say, hey, babe, listen, I'm with you. I'm with you on this. So don't appreciate how you talking to me right now or whatever it may be that you're doing. Remember, I'm here with you. I understand what's fueling this, right? But we don't do that. And so we're just perceiving you as being a dick. And it's like, no, you're being a scared person who doesn't know what to do other than this.
And I think that's such a great way to look at it. Is like, I don't think I acknowledged how scared I was at different parts in my bariatric journey. And not just like to get the surgery, but I think like afterwards, of just almost when I hit every milestone and it went well, I had this kind of mentality of like, when is the other shoe going to drop?
Mm-hmm.
When you have people in relationships who are always thinking about like the other shoe dropping, how do you kind of get them to reframe that and almost be like, it's not a set of shoes?
Yeah, I don't know if I can. There are moments I get them to. I won't say there aren't moments I get people to reframe things. Most of the time, I try to again lean into the fear and try to understand it and like yes, this is. I mean, it is a possible that there is a possibility that you become the person you were before. That's a possibility. The probability lessens if you do the work, right? And so, but just not acknowledging the fear, like trying to hide from the fear, run from the fear, act like it's not there, put it under the like it doesn't go anywhere. It just gets bigger. It's literally I always kind of related to the monster under the bed as a kid. The more you stay in bed and you cover up and you think it's there, the bigger it's getting, and the more you know what I mean. Until you finally just look under the bed and there's nothing there, you're like, okay, right? And so a lot of the times I do that with my patients or my clients. I lean into that fear and try to acknowledge it and validate it of like, yeah, this is a legit fear to have. This is a possibility. Now, how do we stay away from that? What's the probability about this actually happening? What are you doing in your life to make this probability larger? What are you doing to make it smaller? And then I work through it with them that way. I don't try to necessarily reframe it to think about it differently. I try to acknowledge it. And I get that from the theorist that I kind of follow as a therapist. I kind of practice from an intersubjective systems theory perspective. And he told a story. I read a story he told about, and he said his dad was 10 years old and somebody threw a book in the classroom and the kid in front of him ducked and it hit him right in the eye. And so he
God.
from like 10 years old, he was blind in one of his eyes. And so fast forward, I think he was like 65, something like that. And he was going in for surgery on his other eye. And he said he was sitting there watching his dad just freak out because internally you could tell he was just super anxious because there was a chance that he lost vision in his other eye. And so he was going to be blind if the surgery didn't go well. And he said he watched people walk past him and shake his hand and say, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're going to be fine." And nobody was acknowledging the fear. And he said he finally walked up and he said, "Listen, there's a chance that you could lose all your sight, and that's freaking scary." And he said in that moment, when he just acknowledged the fear and how scary it was, he saw his dad kind of come together, and they went and had margaritas after that. And the surgery went well, and he kept his vision and all that. But we run from the fear of things so much, and we try not to acknowledge it. But really, what we should be doing is acknowledging and validating that stuff. And in that, feeling that connection, in that somebody saying that to you, there's kind of a release in that of like, okay, so this isn't weird. This isn't crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm not, whatever. This is a legit thing to have. Now, how do I work to not have that happen?
No, I think that's such a perfect way to look at it and to finally like kind of bring closure to everything really helps. Now, I want to make sure we cover this because we talked about it a little bit beforehand. You have this whole like four horsemen of marriage approach. And I kind of want to see how much relates to bariatric surgery, how much relates to relationships after bariatric surgery. So, can you walk us through what are your four horsemen of marriage?
Yeah, for sure. So I can't take credit for that. That's the Gottmans. The
Hey,
Gottman
no worries.
John and Julie Gottman came up with the Four Horsemen. But so yeah, the Four Horsemen are actually the things that the Gottmans, and if you don't know who the Gottmans are, research them. They're like the world's foremost couples therapists. They have a whole love lab up in Seattle, and they've been researching couples and intimate relationships for 40 plus years at this point. So, and hopefully this month I'll be a certified Gottman therapist. I'm turning all my stuff in, hopefully to get certified. So, but yeah, man, it's been a long time coming. I've been working on it for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. So hopefully I can pass with this month. So anyway, the Four Horsemen were the things that they found that were the most detrimental to relationships. And so what they did was they actually studied conversations in an intimate relationship between couples, and based off a 3-minute conversation, how often these four things showed up, they could predict with 96% accuracy whether the relationship was going to succeed or fail.
Oh, God.
3-minute conversation, 96% accuracy based on these things showing up in that conversation. And so the Four Horsemen are, the first one is criticism. And that's kind of self explanatory. And it's a characterological attack against your spouse or your partner. And so instead of saying, "Hey, this morning when you said this, that was painful," I say, "Hey, you're a freaking jerk," or "You never listen to me," or "You always do this," or and it becomes a criticism. And what they found is there is no such thing as constructive criticism in an intimate relationship. There is only destructive criticism.
Really?
Yes, you cannot criticize your intimate partner. It is destructive. And even when we think about constructive criticism, there is no such thing when it comes to intimate relationships. So,
That's such an interesting thought because when I really think of constructive criticism from everyone, no one ever feels good after it. Like, even when they're like, oh, wow, I'm so glad you shared that.
right?
Yeah.
Constructive. So, yeah, you got to give me a pass on being constructive. No, that freaking kind of hurt,
Yeah.
right? And so, and so the antidote, and I'll give you the antidotes to all four as I go along. So the antidote to criticism was what's called a gentle startup. And so that's the way we approach a conversation. Do we approach it gently? Do we try to look for ways that we actually are part of the problem as well? Hey, this morning I know that I woke up kind of grouchy, and I know I am partly responsible for what happened this morning, and I just need you to know that was really hurtful what you said, right? So I'm coming at it gently, and I'm pointing to a specific situation, and I'm saying I feel hurt about this situation, and then I really need you just to really think about saying that but again next time, or before you say that again next time, because that was really painful. Or I need you to apologize for that, right? And
Yeah,
so,
no, it makes
again,
perfect sense.
when it comes to those intimate relationships, trying to focus on single incidents, not the person as a whole or multiple incidences at once, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And it goes back to kind of what you started talking about earlier of this whole like just being aware of other people. Like instead of having this I approach to a we approach or just thinking of other people, that it's amazing. That's like the first horseman. And that's kind of the first tenet you've kind of laid down while we were talking today.
Right, absolutely. The second one is contempt. So contempt is where you're kind of talking to your down to your partner, you're being sarcastic, you're kind of coming from a place of superiority when you say. So kind of the example I always use is, a husband and wife are trying to think of ways to do chores better, work together doing chores, right? And the husband who isn't historically good at lists says, I wonder if I could put a list on the refrigerator. And the wife says, you really think you're good at lists? Like that's a contemptuous statement. You really, you don't ever do this, or you really think you're going to do it at that, or whatever. Like you just coming from this place of like, ugh, you know. And this is actually the most detrimental horseman is contempt. So it is the leading cause of divorce is the contempt horseman. And so in that, the antidote to contempt is actually again turning inward and seeing and talking about what you're feeling. And so I hear you talking about lists, but I'm just kind of worried that won't last. We've tried that in the past, and it hasn't ever seemed to work. And so I'm kind of worried about that, right? And so you turn it more about yourself and what you're feeling instead of talking bad about or talking down to your partner. And then the third one is defensiveness. And so the really difficult thing in criticism actually fuels defensiveness. But defensiveness, when our partner comes to us and say, "Hey, when you did this, it was hurtful." Well, what about when you did this? Or I didn't do that. So you're kind of playing an innocent victim, and there's another. I'm having trouble with the other part. There's two things: innocent victim and something else. But basically, defensive against anything the person is bringing to you, right? And so even if you don't agree with what they're saying, listening to them and trying to take in what they're saying and not being defensive and actually looking for any little part of responsibility you can take. That's the antidote: is listening, accepting any part of responsibility that you can, even if it's a small part. So, and that kind of leads into thinking about one of the biggest kind of sayings that Gottmans have is validation doesn't equal agreement.
Yeah, that one's got a punch right in the giblets
Mhm.
for me. Like that's like if you could do the America's Funniest Home videos of my relationship, can you just repeat that again? Because I'm pretty sure my wife's gonna make me get that tattooed.
Validation does not equal agreement. So I can validate how you feel, and it doesn't mean I agree with how your perspective. And so when my wife is coming to me and saying, "Hey, this happened," I could become immediately defensive, like, "No, it didn't. No, it didn't." Or I can say, "Really, tell me, like, help me understand more there. What you experienced? Oh, you felt this? Well, I would say, yeah. If I was trying to reach out to I'm gonna use a hypothetical. I tried to cuddle you in bed last night, and you kind of pushed me off. Yeah, I can understand how that would be hurtful. Now, was I sleeping? Probably, right? I may have been sleeping in hot or something like that. But that doesn't do away with the fact that she tried to cuddle and I kind of went like that, and it may have hurt her feelings. Yeah, I can understand why that's hurtful. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not agreeing with how that went. I didn't push her off knowingly and trying to be a jerk. So I'm not agreeing with it, but I can definitely validate those feelings of how that was hurtful. And I think there's a lot of that statement, validation does not equal agreement, can be life changing for people if they implement it. If you can start looking to understand and validate somebody, no matter what relationship it is, and looking for validation and understanding of that person, it changes so much for you. It's so freeing because you can understand. I don't have to agree with this person. Like this doesn't have to change who I am or what I think, but I can listen to them and validate them. You know.
Yeah, 100.
So, um, so yeah. So accepting responsibility with even a small part, looking for a small part of accepting responsibility is antidote. And then the last one is stonewalling. And so stonewalling is where you're basically not giving your partner really much communication or uh, interaction that you're listening to them. And so most of the time it's kind of like shutting down. You just, okay, yeah. And your partner's talking to you and you're just, yeah, or not saying anything at all. You're just stonewalling them. And so most of the time when that's happening, the person that's stonewalling is actually flooded. They have a lot of their own emotions going on inside, and they can't. They're just at a place they just shut down, and they go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so the antidote for that one is actually physiological self-soothing. So when you feel yourself start to become flooded, you implement something in your relationship called an effective break, and you say, "Hey, I'm getting flooded right now. I need to take a break." And you split for a minimum of 25 minutes, no more than 24 hours, and all you do is focus on self-soothing. You're not ruminating. You're not thinking of counter arguments. You're not doing anything. I'm going to get back at them. You are simply focused on self soothing to try to recenter yourself. And then you come back to the conversation.
It's crazy because I look at that of like that no less than 24 minutes and no more than 24 hours. And Tony Dungy was a coach in the NFL, and I've read like all of his books because he's like a perfect blend of like faith based but very calm demeanor. Like he's not a big rah rah guy, but
Right.
he also says like feel an emotion for 24 hours and then let it go. And it's just I really like that blend of like no less than 24 minutes, no more than 24 hours really does give like the you need to feel the emotion but not get tied up on it. So I think that's a really cool little frame on that.
Yeah. And the key here that a lot of people miss out on, they don't come back to the conversation. So I'm not an advocate of the you just let it go because that's not how we're built and emotionally.
It never gets let go because
Right. Exactly.
I'm sure I'm sure in your experience, without having to go into personal things, there has to be blowups where all of a sudden it becomes like, and you left the stove on in December of 19, like 89. And it's like, wow, you've really holstered that one.
Yep. Man, it happened. Man, that is one of the biggest things that I've working with couples that I have to people don't understand. We have to go back because
Yes.
most of the time, what's happening now in present day isn't about now in present day.
Hmm.
It's about something that happened years ago that we've never dealt with, and we put it in a box and we put it in the attic, and we just always do that. And then finally, our attic is full, and now we're fighting about everything. And it really isn't about what's happening now. It's because we haven't cleaned out any of the boxes that we've stored. And so when I go ahead.
I like that analogy of like, if we don't clean out what's like in our basements or in our attics, it doesn't allow us like room for new growth or for new things to come in. And
Exactly.
it's almost
Exactly.
like, yes, we still haven't addressed these things.
Right. I have couples all the time come in, and I think the longest one right now that I have is an issue that happened with them 20 years prior, and they never dealt with it. And 20 years later, there was still ripple effects from that thing 20 years ago. And as soon as we actually sat and worked through and processed through that experience, never talked about it again. And that it happens in every relationship. Something big happens and we try to let it go instead of actually work through it. But which usually let it go means shove it away. And that
Yes.
reduces our capacity to be able to deal with other stuff. And eventually our capacity is full and we can't deal with anything. So we're arguing about everything and we're mad about everything. And all this is happening. And it's like, I know what I need to do differently, but I just can't implement it. And it's usually because there's hurts and pains from the past that need to be worked through. And as soon as we work through those and they hear their partner say, yeah, I can understand how you felt that way. And I'm sorry, it's gone. And it's never brought up again. And then now they have capacity to do the different things and not criticize and not be defensive and not be contemptuous and, talk, validate instead of argue about it. Like they have the room to do the things they need to do, but that they didn't have before because they actually went back and they repaired that situation. And so there's so much that idea of letting it go, it just doesn't. Now it may work in coaching, it may work in friendships at times. It doesn't, but it may work in business relationships, right? It normally doesn't. But from
I
when
like how you give it may, but like in all these, like then you're like under the breath, you're like, it really doesn't. Like
it really
it's just
doesn't,
put it there. Like in all life, you need to address the elephant in the room and then move on from it.
it's possible. I mean, listen, anything is possible. It may work. It
Okay, Kevin
probably
Barnett, thank you
probably
so
not.
much.
Right, right. So it just becomes a practice of talking about the things that are really difficult, which leads back to all of this that we're talking about, of having those difficult, uncomfortable conversations, and in that building trust and building connection, and not letting a wound sit there and just fester and fester and fester over the course of time. Get in there and do the surgery, sew it up, heal it, and you don't ever have to deal with it again.
I think, wow, that's like such a deep point that I kind of want to put the ribbon on that as we get close to time of just realizing, even with bariatric surgery, like it does not fix a lot of your problems. Fixing your problems fixes your problems. And I think that that's probably what I hear the most is from coaching clients and working with other things is, well, I figured once I lost the weight, all these other things would fall in life. And it's like, well, you've gotten one box out of the attic. There's still about 15 more. So kind of take what you did with the box there. What did you learn from dealing with that? Oh, it got better. Move on to your next box.
Right, right. No, I mean, again, thinking about food as an addiction,
Yeah.
right? It is clouding and usually keeping us from what we need to deal with and what we need to work through. Now, thinking about alcoholism or drug addiction, or like you have to handle the actual physical, alcoholism, the actual act of drinking, or the drug addiction or the food addiction. You have to handle that first. But then there's all the stuff that was underneath it that was actually helping, like, it's a tool. Addiction
Mhm.
is a tool to not deal with the emotions that you need to deal with, right?
It's definitely a self-soothing technique that it's only taken me about 40 years to realize is highly ineffective.
Yep, exactly. It's ineffective because it's detrimental on your health,
Correct. Yes.
but it's effective at staying away from the stuff you should be dealing with.
Yes.
Right? It's a real all of it. Alcohol is a really effective tool to suppress the things you don't want to deal with. It is an effective tool. Now it's ineffective because it's detrimental to your health and it's going to erode your liver and at some point cause you to die if you don't stop, or cause something bad to happen. But that's why it's addictive.
No, and that's probably the best way to look at it. Because when talking with clients, clearly I'm not in the capacity to deal with addiction, and I want to make that very clear. But I do always say, like, that might be something you want to talk to a professional that's certified when that happens. So, Derek, this has been amazing. We're getting close to time, so I want to run you through our lightning round.
Okay. All right.
What we do in Busy Bariatrics is we use our busy method and our framework to get everything done. I'm just going to ask you a whole bunch of questions of what we do. The B stands for building habits. What's the best habit people can start to build in their relationships with their spouses? I'm going to try to speak it to you a lot for that.
Yeah, yeah. Listening to understand, not trying to be understood. And so in any conflict, I want to listen to understand you, and you're going to listen to understand me. And if we both have that mindset and that habit, then our communication is going to improve exponentially. But most of the time, people they fight to be right, or they fight to be understood, and in that, we're fighting for ourselves instead of fighting for each other. And so, listening to understand is a habit that people need to build.
I think if I have to get two tattoos, you've given me both. Validation does not equal agreement, and listen to understand, not to be understood.
Yep. Yep.
All right. What is the best way? And we kind of covered it with a little bit, but we'll try to tweak it. What is the best piece of advice you can give people around food or understanding the role nutrition and food plays in relationships?
I would say in anything, it needs to be an us journey as much as possible. It needs to be us doing it. It needs to be, we both need to be on board. And if the person's not getting on board, trying to understand why they're not. And if the relationship is I always struggle with this part right here. Outside of a really unhealthy relationship, right? So think of abuse or a really, really, really codependent relationship. If we are in this together and we're both looking out for each other, it can be an us journey. And most of the time, the partner is going to be on board with that. And so, trying as much as possible in anything that we do, whether it's nutrition, food, anything like that, we're going to try to do it together, or at least have an understanding of why the other person is doing it and support that person. So I think that's instead of trying to, in an intimate relationship, instead of trying to take this me approach of I'm on this journey myself and I'm doing this myself, taking the approach of how can we do this together, even if it's me getting up at 5 a.m. and working out, or it's me changing some of my diet because maybe my partner doesn't need to. It's a us journey because my partner is supporting me or I'm supporting my partner. And so I think that would probably be off the top of my head the biggest piece of advice of how can we make it a us thing and not a me thing.
Love it. Okay, the S is for staying active. Best thing couples can do to stay active and keep it PG. The second best thing that couples can do to
Best thing
stay
couple can do to be active. Um, I mean, that's really going to be couple dependent, right? I mean, what is it? Again, rituals of connection. I'm trying to work there. The Gottmans do have an app called the Gottman Card Deck app. It's a little red box with two hearts. And in there, there's like opportunity exercises and things like that. And so to go out on dates and stuff like that. So go in there and try to find, fun things that you can do that are physically active that may not necessarily be going to the gym. Like my wife doesn't necessarily prefer going to the gym, but she likes riding bikes. You know what I mean? And so we were at the retreat. We went and got a bike and rode around the whole resort and did the whole treasure hunt thing that they had.
That's a fun one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So finding stuff like that that again drives connection. We're doing this together, and it's physically active.
Love it. All right. The Y is for how do you show up for yourself?
How do you show up for yourself? Therapy. I think is the biggest thing. Get it, and I want to say this: if you don't feel like your therapist is understanding you or connecting with you, talk to them about it. And if they're resistant to it or they're defensive about how you're feeling about the relationship, find somebody else. I'm gonna say that because people need to hear that. But I would say therapy would be a big one, especially going through the bariatric journey. And again, thinking about food as an addiction and you're taking that away, there's going to be so much opened up at that point, emotionally, that you need to deal with that one person by themselves is not going to be able to deal with that. And so going and getting a therapist and having that as a part of taking care of yourself. And then again, within your relationships, there's nothing wrong with having some me time. It just can't be all about you. Like every all time can't be all about you.
Mhm.
All time can't be me time. So if that works within your relationship, like my wife and I'll sit on every now and then I'll sit on the Xbox and play the game, and she'll sit right there on the couch and she'll watch her little shows she likes to watch. But it's me time. We're doing stuff that we even individually like, and I need some decompressor from therapy, but we're still kind of together in that. And then like this last weekend, I went hunting. This is my second time hunting. I did get something.
Oh, wow. What'd you get?
I got it like it was like a quarter inch short of being an 8 point buck. And
Wow.
so, yeah, yeah. So it was exciting. And so my wife was like, no, you've been wanting to do that, babe. Go do that. And then I was only planning on staying the night and we needed to stay another night. I ended up needing to stay another night. She's like, I get it, babe. You're good. Take the time. Right. And so that's where communication in a relationship matters. But therapy is the biggest thing I advocate for, obviously, as a therapist. And then having good communication around what me time means and how it works within your relationship.
It's funny. I always say, like, how to show up for yourself is go to the gym regularly. It's weird how we self promote what we do.
Uh-huh. Right. And that like again, for me, I go to the gym as much as I can because that is my time. I like to do that. But my wife doesn't like to do that. So how can I do something physically with her? Right. So
Exactly. All right. Final one is I know you're like, I spelled busy. What's left on here? We put an exclamation point at the end.
okay.
And we treat that for finding extra sources of healthy dopamine. So, what is your favorite healthy source of dopamine?
I mean, again, and I'm probably biased because I've been married since I was 17 and I'm a couples therapist now and all that stuff, but I really enjoy doing things with my wife.
That's awesome.
Like that to me, it's a relationship. It's in the context of relationship. It's my intimate relationship, and so it's just doing things with her. I think it, for me, is a healthy form of dopamine. Doing something fun with your intimate partner, doing something fun with your kids. Um, you know, it doesn't have to be cost anything. Go to the park, go to the lake, go do something that's free, but just do something with somebody you're in a relationship with. It you're in.
That's awesome. And I don't think I've ever heard that answer before. Do something with someone who you're in a relationship with. So I love it.
Yeah, it's a dopamine stimulant right there. You're doing something fun, right?
Derek, this has been awesome. And look at this. I landed the plane. We're at 58 minutes, 39 seconds recording. So I
Nice.
I'm getting good at this.
Yeah, you are.
If people liked what they heard and want to like consume more of your content or get in touch with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, so my website is thegianttherapist.com. I'm about to start writing my blog, so that'll be updated weekly with blog posts. I'm not very active on social media. I need to get better. I still haven't posted stuff from the retreat. I'm like, it's getting farther and farther away. I'm gonna be the last one to post. But most of my handles are at @thegiant_therapist on Instagram and TikTok, and on Facebook. It's at the therapy giant, and then on LinkedIn it's at the giant therapist. So some variation of those. So but yeah, you can hit me up, message me on any of the social media platforms, or hit me up on my website, and I love to talk about stuff about relationships, and try to do what I can to kind of give people little tidbits and advice to help with when I can. It's not therapeutic. I'm nobody's therapist except for my client's therapist. So if you message me, I'm not going to be your therapist, but I will try to help how I can.
Yes. Derek, thank you so much for everything.
No
It's been a
problem.
joy talking and catching up with you.
Yeah,
Now I have to do my long closeout for everyone.
you're good. You're good.
If you want more from our content, please go ahead and hit subscribe to our YouTube page, Busy Bariatrics, for more in-depth content. If you like this episode, the best way you can help support the show is by leaving a 5-star rating and review. Every week we'll be giving away one free product from our sponsors and announcing the winner on our Friday email list, so be sure to subscribe there as well. If you feel this episode can help someone, screenshot it, drop it in your stories with a link to the episode to help spread the love. And as always, keep getting busy. Derek, thanks again for having and being on.
Man, I appreciate you having me on, bro. Thank you.
Anytime, my man. Peace.